Today on Smackey's Garage, we're going to be talking about carburetors, float levels, and how to set them. So today we're going to be talking about this Holley 750 here. This is a double pumper that has two fuel bowls, both on the front, on the primary side, and on the secondary side. So we're going to walk through exactly how to set the levels of these fuel bowls correctly. Now, when we say correctly, we're talking about we want the fuel to be at a certain level so that the carburetor doesn't have any issues and the engine runs well. On these carburetors, Holleys, Brawlers, you actually want to set the flow level so that the fuel level is barely at the window on the carburetor. So this carburetor here, as well as the Brawler that's on the car behind me, has two windows on it. So the Brawler actually has them on both sides. This only has them on one side. So let's go ahead, let's open this up, take a look at the float, and then we're going to set the fuel level on the primary side. Now, you don't need to take this apart to set the primary float or the secondary float. I'm just doing it to show you what you're actually setting. Now, on the carburetor, you're gonna have your main body, you're gonna have the metering block, and then you're gonna have the fuel bowl. Inside this fuel bowl is where the float is staying. So here's the fuel bowl. So inside the fuel bowl, there's this float. This float here is what helps set the level of the fuel inside of this fuel bowl. So what happens is, as fuel fills up, this starts going up. So as this is moving up, when it hits a certain level at a set point that you're gonna be setting back here, it's gonna shut off the fuel from coming in the bowl. When you start running out of fuel, you run out of fuel, or fuel goes lower, this is gonna drop. And then as this is dropping, the valve is gonna open back up and it's gonna let fuel in. Now, an ideal scenario and how these work is this will sit at a certain level and it'll maintain that fuel level as you're driving. So it's essentially going to equalize itself so it's not going up and down. Now, if you're in a situation with a carburetor where you don't have enough fuel pressure or don't have enough fuel pump, but I guess if you're not going to have enough pump, you probably won't have enough pressure. If you do let the float run dry, then your car could end up in a lean condition, which won't be great for the engine. Now, it's very important that you make sure that you have the right fuel pump set for your setup. You want to make sure you have the right fuel pressure, not only at idle, but also when you're cruising and under wide open throttle. You want to make sure that your pump can support whatever carburetor you are running, because if you don't have enough pump, you don't have enough pressure, you don't have enough fuel. If this ends up running low, then your car is going to start leaning out. And the only real way you're going to note that is you're either going to see a drop in fuel pressure at the carburetor, or you're going to see the air to fuel ratio start spiking lean. Now, if this gets to a point where this is too low, then you could potentially have a lean condition and cause an issue with the engine. If it gets too high, then you're probably going to overflow the carburetor and you're going to start running more rich. So those are some things that you need to watch out for, and why it's important that we're setting this level to be at the bottom of this sight glass. So looking at this here, where we want to get the fuel level to is right here at the bottom of the sight glass, so that when we rock the car back and forth, we can see a little bit of gas in there. So look here on my Brawler, it's showing that it's at the right location if the car was running. Now, it's important to check the fuel level when the car is running, not when it's just sitting. Now, on the car behind me, when we set the float levels, we're going to make sure that the car is running and fully warmed up. Now, one of the things I've noticed on this car is when I turn it off, there's some boiling of fuel on it. I think it's because my fuel pressure regulator is actually mounted to the head. It's spaced off by some nylon, but I think because it's getting so hot, it's boiling some fuel up, and you can actually see the float level and the amount of fuel in there change. So when you go ahead and you do this on the car, make sure the car is running, make sure it's idling at a nice steady state at temperature. So here's the carburetor that we're going to adjust. So we're going to be looking at how to adjust the float up and down. So to do this, you need a flat-bladed screwdriver and a 5/8 wrench for this carburetor. So you're going to put your 5/8 on the nut that's underneath the screw, and then you're going to loosen this up to be able to move this nut around. Now, depending on how you move this nut, it's going to change the level of the float, which in turn changes the level of the gas inside your fuel bowl. Now, with this open, if I decide to go counterclockwise and then tighten this down and hold it here, that just moved the float up and it raised the float level. Now, if I were to loosen this and then tighten this down, or go clockwise, then tighten this to hold it in place, now the float was lowered. So it's essentially counterclockwise, it raises the float, clockwise, it drops the float. So if your gas is too low in here, you're going to raise the float, which raises the gas. You're going to move this counterclockwise. If your float level and the gas level is too high in here, you're going to drop the float, which means you're going to move this clockwise, this way. So it's as easy as that to check and to test. Now that's it today for talking carburetors. You know, we've been covering a lot of the basic tunings for Holleys like this, but it's also applicable to other carburetors as well. Now, setting something like the float height is incredibly important for the performance of your car, because if you want it to run at the optimal place, then you need to make sure that everything is tuned up. Now, this is just one piece of making sure that the carburetor is running correctly. Not only do you need to make sure your floats are set, you need to make sure you have the right jets in the carburetor. You need to make sure that you have the right accelerator pump in the carburetor. I mean, there's 2 cams on either side. And then make sure the accelerator pump nozzles up here are the correct size. Now, there's a lot of things that go into optimizing how your car, boat, whatever drives. And the floats are one of the more important ones, because not setting them correctly could have really detrimental effects to your engine. So that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in this week on Smackey's Garage.